Welcome to Toot Your Own Horn, Music Matters. I am here today with Dr. Kevin Allemagne. I am so excited to have you, Kevin. And would you be so kind as to tell us the story of how you started to play the clarinet?
Sure. It's not very glamorous. So in my elementary school, you could start a band instrument in the fifth grade.
Mhm.
And out of my class, there were six of us who did not. So what happened to the six of us is we were put in study hall and I was bored and everybody seemed to be having a lot of fun. And then we'd have to go sit at their concert. What I really wanted to do was play drums. Band program had a policy that if you did not have 2 years of piano, you could
Right.
not play percussion instruments. And I didn't have 2 years of piano. So my mother had a old plastic Bundy clarinet in her closet that she played when she was in high school. And so it was a cheap, inexpensive alternative to buying a new instrument. And so that's what they said, well, here you go. And so in sixth grade, I got to start, and I was, of course, behind everybody because they'd had a year of study. But by the end of that grade, I was first chair.
Oh my.
And well, and it was actually it's funny because you don't think of fifth and sixth graders as being very competitive.
Right.
And there were two other girls that were constantly vying for chair placement. And so in our band program, you could challenge someone once every 2 weeks to get the higher chair. It was a transforming experience. I didn't realize how much at the time, but it connected me to so many opportunities down the road. But I think, yeah, it's not glamorous, but that's how it came to be. So
So was it that you just went to your mom and said, I want to get out of study hall. Can I play the clarinet?
I was smarter than that because my parents wouldn't have done that then. They were very frugal, kind of stingy. And so the idea of buying a new instrument was, I knew that would just wouldn't fly. I was very strategic. And so I thought, well, Mom's got this clarinet. She seems to have had positive experiences, and so maybe if I approach it from that standpoint, and then I really want to play music and stuff.
So what's really interesting is that there was no one coaxing you into it. You just sort of convinced yourself because it was a better alternative than study hall.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because I was the most unlikely person for it. My family really didn't emphasize music at all. I think even the community I lived in, there were certain families and certain individuals that had prominent members that were very musically inclined and stuff like that. I wasn't part of any of that. So I was the outsider. But it wasn't band that really fueled a passion for me. It was orchestra. And so when I was in 10th grade, in our community, 10th grade was the high school building. So 10th through 12. Ninth grade was still junior high building. And in the high school, they had orchestra. They had it in junior high, but it was just strings. And so in 10th grade, remember hearing the orchestra, and I was like, oh, that's really cool, right? And he's like, well, we always need wind players. And I knew nothing. I knew nothing about that. And so when I started playing in the orchestra, everything opened up. Felt like I'd found a home. And I say this, it was one of the things that really got me through high school and saved me. It was amazing. Band wasn't that great for me. Orchestra was where I was able to find a voice, and I felt authentic in that. So,
How did you stay with it as a young person? Was it really avoiding study hall? That really kept you going?
yeah.
Or what was it that kept you going when you didn't have a great role model?
Well, I think it was because I loved playing. I loved playing the clarinet. There was a moment too, it was interesting in junior high, because it was so competitive on clarinet, and I showed, I think, for at the time, pretty good promise as a music student. They needed a bassoonist, and so they asked me to play bassoon. And so I was like, okay, and that's a little quirky instrument, double reed, all kinds of weird stuff, right? But no one told me that the bassoon is in the bass clef. And I had never been taught about bass clef. And so I think it's fascinating because for like 5 or 6 months, I played the bassoon and the bass line
Yeah.
thinking it was treble.
Oh my God, are you serious?
I'm not, and the band teacher never said a word.
You're kidding. So you were playing in the wrong clef the whole time and he didn't notice that you were playing the
That
wrong.
that shows you how awful the band must have been.
Oh my goodness gracious. And
But
you figured that out. You
yeah,
figured
I did. And then but I figured out too that, I think, and this is absolutely true. There was a bias about boys playing clarinet in my school. And I think even the teachers reinforced this, that they thought it was a girl's instrument. And so they were trying to steer me towards bassoon. At an early age, I figured out, you know what? This isn't who I am. Clarinet is who I am, and I'm going to play the clarinet. And unfortunately for the other two girls, I always was first chair after that.
So you were the one who said, I'm not going to play the bassoon. Thank you. You have to
Mhm.
find someone else.
It's interesting because not a lot of kids at that age have the ability to express themselves in that way. And I think that's probably why I do the career that I do too.
Then what happened?
Well, I grew up in central Iowa, and one of the universities that had back in the 80s a really strong music program was Drake University, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yep.
And there was a professor of clarinet, Dr. Luke, and when I was in high school, I would do sometimes honor bands, and Drake would have an honor band. And I think the honor band was an opportunity for them to actually recruit potential music majors and that sort of thing. So when that was going on, Dr. Luke heard me play. And at the time, I was playing I finally had a wood clarinet, but it was a noble, not the best instrument. Dr. Luke heard me play, and then he told my parents, he's like, he's exceptional for his age, and he needs a better instrument. Otherwise, that won't shine through. And they had these competitions for scholarships. Drake still to this day will not award a full tuition scholarship for music. They will award a half, but not full. And I had competed in the competition and was awarded a scholarship. And so this is absolutely true. I'm the first person from my family to go to college, and I was so naive about college and tuition and things like that, that I honestly thought that when you got there, they would issue books to you like they did in high school. I didn't know you had to buy the books or so
Funny.
it's true. It's just absolutely true. And it kind of shows you how if you don't come from a family that has that kind of knowledge and background, why would you know, right? So anyway, what happened was I had gotten into Drake, and they were, really a lovely, I mean, wonderful people, and I felt like this would be the right thing. And so I thought I was going to be a music major, a major in clarinet and all this. And then I'm not exaggerating, one week before I was supposed to go, my parents said, "Oh, you have to pay tuition and we can't afford that." And I'm like, "What?" And this was back in the 80s. So we didn't have the internet. We didn't have like the ability to easily change things and stuff. So I actually couldn't go because they informed me they didn't have the money, even though they had told me they did.
Oh no.
No, seriously. And so there is a point to this though. So what ended up happening was because I didn't have hardly any funds. And then so I worked that first year, and I was an honors student. I had good grades. Should never have happened, but hey, it happened. So I worked at Pizza Hut. I was a cook and a server, and I earned money. And then I started a couple of semesters of college, but it was just too expensive for me to do it on my own. My parents couldn't help me at all. And so there was a guy from the Army, recruiter, who said, "We hear that you're a pretty exceptional clarinet player, and the Army needs clarinet players. So would you consider joining the army, or at least, but you don't just get to join, you have to audition." So at that time, they flew me down to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I had never flown. I'd never been out of the state practically. I was very sheltered in that way. Go down and I play for this commander of the band, and they say, "Yeah, he has enough skill and talent that we can admit him." So then I enrolled in the army, and went through basic training like any soldier. And then after you get through basic training, then you go to the Armed Forces School of Music. My clarinet teacher, Nicholas Schnobrick, was the principal clarinetist for the Disney orchestra. I was so fortunate to have the education and training that I did there. And then I spent 4 years in the military being a clarinet player for them. And I could have stayed in, ended up leaving and pursuing other career paths, but that's kind of how it worked for me. Yeah.
Wow. What made you leave the military and decide you wanted to do something else?
Okay. So I have to be honest. The reason I left is because I was tricked into going somewhere that I didn't want to end up going. And when I went there, I found out later why I was tricked because they had a commander there who was actually I can, as a psychologist, I can say this was, I think, mentally ill, and he was very abusive. And back in the 80s and early 90s, that kind of stuff could happen very easily. It doesn't happen like that anymore, and that's a good thing. But he was very abusive emotionally, and one time he threw a baton at me. I was upset, and it wasn't necessarily at me. He was upset at the band, but he threw a baton and it hit me, and I just thought, you know what? I deserve something different. It's different now. It's so different, and it's a good thing because I think that's a wonderful career path for musicians. It served its purpose at the time. It got me started, it got me on my feet, and then I was able to go on to college and then subsequently have a good career in another path. But yeah, it started off, yeah, it was there. For people who don't know, I'm a therapist, and so I have my own a mental health practice. So I see a wide variety of issues, but I specialize in trauma. I also do a lot of forensic work for court, especially with regard to family issues and custody issues. And so doing that work is pretty intense and tough. And so part of being a good therapist is knowing how to do good self-care. It's essential. It's an ethical requirement that you do it. So one of the things that I find that is good self-care for me is music. Music has been so throughout my life an opportunity to give me purpose, but it also provides connection. And so even today, so I'm the principal clarinetist in the Des Moines Community Orchestra. I also sub with other orchestras in the area. I play in several small chamber ensembles as well. That has facilitated a lot of wonderful relationships and friendships and connection. It just helps you feel a part of community. It feels alive. The orchestra elected me. I'm currently the president of the orchestra, and so I have a lot of responsibility from an administrative and governance standpoint. We're in the process of changing conductors because our conductor is retiring. So next year's whole year of auditioning. So I'm helping facilitate that. But the nice thing about that is I get to know people really well and feel like I can be of service to them. And that orchestra is an amazing orchestra because they are some really wonderfully dedicated and very professional musicians that give their time so that the community has opportunity to have access to exceptional programming and music that otherwise some people can't afford. So, and we just brought in like two pianists from France to do two concertos. And for them, many of the people, they couldn't have afforded a ticket to that if they'd gone to a traditional symphony. And yet it was a very high quality performance. So I'm really proud of the work that we're doing with that. Well, in music, by the way, Lisa, was how I met Julie, my wife. I had gotten out of the military. I was going to Iowa State University for my undergraduate, and my wife and I are both Catholic. And there is this thing on Thursday nights at the Catholic Church called TNL, Thursday Night Liturgy. But the music for that service is much more upbeat, more contemporary. It's at 10 o'clock at night. And so at 9 o'clock, the musicians gather. And so I was new. I was new to that. And I hear this beautiful coloratura soprano warming up and getting ready because she's going to be doing the cantering. And I was like, my gosh, what an amazing voice. And so the piano player I knew, and I said, who is that? And he's like, oh, that's Julie. She's one of our cantors. And I said, oh my gosh, what an amazing voice. Well, evidently, I didn't know this. So when I was warming up, Julie went to the piano player because she knew him too. She's like, who is that guy? He's amazing. That tone, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Clarinets usually sound so wonky. Well, we became immediate friends and then eventually started dating and obviously got married and have three children. And I think this December, it's 32 years that we've been married. So
Congratulations.
but music was the thing that connected me to her. She was one of the stars of the music program there, and she invited me to play Shepherd on the Rock on her senior recital. She's such a good person and such a great musician. I just feel so blessed and fortunate that we get to share our love of music. So a lot of the small chamber ensembles that we do, Julie will play piano, but she also once in a while I'll play piano and she'll sing. So we do a lot of gig work like that, and we don't do it because we necessarily need the money, but it's so fun to be able to connect with audiences and people and other musicians. It's just it makes a fulfilling life.
For
So.
sure. And what about your children? Have they become musical?
Yeah, all three of them were encouraged to play musical instruments. Our oldest daughter, Cecilia, has extremely natural vocal abilities like Julie. And Julie really worked hard, though, to develop her craft and skill. Cecilia is just natural. Like it sucks because she doesn't have to practice as much. So, but the youngest one, Madeline, she's a junior in high school right now. She is an oboe player. And when she was in fifth grade and it was time to start looking for an instrument, Julie also played French horn. And she said, well, what about that? And I said, well, let's try them all. I said, but I have a feeling that Madeline just has the personality and the just feel that I think she's going to want to do oboe. And sure enough, she made a sound on the oboe the first time. We're so proud of her. She just made an Iowa All-State. Is exceptionally difficult. It's only the top 2% of the musicians, high school musicians in the state. And she's just worked very, very hard. I think her plan is actually to double major in biochemistry or biomedical engineering with a double major in oboe performance. And so we're looking at schools that might be able to facilitate that right now. But for her in marching band, oboes don't march. And so she actually had to audition to get into the drum line, and she's one of their bass drum players, and she does a really good job with it too. But it's helped her make friends, connection. It's also teaching her discipline about how you have to do time management and things like that. So really, I'm very impressed and proud of the work that she's done. So, but I think music is going to be a big part of her life as she moves forward too. Jonathan was a trombone player, and he just was one of those kids that band was fun. Band was a time to just hang out with people, but not serious study or anything like that. It's very frustrating for Julie, but that's who he was, and so he hasn't stayed up with it. Cecilia, it's interesting. She works at our local CBS television station. She is basically, in essence, there's a term, but she basically stage manages all the news productions and things like that. And she's really found a path. But it's interesting because as a singer, she learned, and she used to perform in musical theater like I do, and she learned stage presence and how to really do the behind the scenes work that is so necessary to make whatever looks on stage pretty and polished.
Right.
So she's learned all of that stuff. So she's very, very good. And so music helped her develop into her career path.
Does it feel like you're a musical family?
Oh, yes. We frequently do things together as a family and do music. And for instance, like Christmas Eve, our church has a few different masses, and they always ask our family to do it. And so, like Jonathan, I will make him sing. So, but we have friends that join us too that want to do music with us. And so we find that, we try and find things as a family to do, and our friends seem to want to join us. And there's always, there's these moments that aren't planned or scripted where I might sit down at the piano and start playing something, and Julia will come in and she'll start singing, and it's impromptu, but then the rest of the family comes around and we start doing stuff. So it's a huge part of our identity. So yeah.
If somebody was listening to this podcast and just amazed by your story and was considering playing a woodwind instrument, what would you tell them right now to do to inspire them to try?
One of the things I think is amazing about playing an instrument is that it gives you a voice, and that voice is unique. And so look at different instruments, find the voice. And if you don't find it right away, it's okay. It's easy to change that. But finding that voice will help you become such an authentic individual in the world. It will give you confidence. It will give you creativity. It will nurture the development of who you are as a person. And so find that voice and stay with it. And unfortunately, there are people who want to kind of squelch your voice sometimes. I would tell them, don't let that happen. There are ways to have it come out. And so persevere, stay with it, but it'll make so much of a difference. I don't know how many times in therapy I have heard people say to me, because eventually they find out that I do music, because they'll be like, I went to see this musical and you and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of them will say to me, I really regret either never doing music or having the opportunity, but then I stopped. And I'm like, well, then why don't we get started with that? Why don't we find a way for you to get started and resume that kind of life? And I think people regret if they don't have music in their life. So stay with it, because it will make a difference. It'll fulfill you in ways that maybe you don't even have an idea about, but it will.